With the semifinals of the college football playoff set and two spots awaiting in the national championship game, Marcus Freeman and the Notre Dame Fighting Irish are just one victory away from marching its way to its first national championship in 37 years. Standing in its way is a distant but yet all familiar historical foe awaiting them at the Orange Bowl in Miami. Want to find out who this opponent is and how the Irish might take them down? Stay tuned to find out on Talk Like a Champion. Welcome back, Irish Nation. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with us on this semi-final edition of Talk Like a Champion. Of course, you're with your man, Mr. CeeLo here, and it's been a busy last couple of weeks. I'm sorry I haven't gotten back with you guys, but judging by the response, you guys have been busy as well. But I got one question, and it comes from Jay, who says, how will the Irish fare if they don't have Jeremiah Love this week? That's a very good question, Jay, and honestly, I don't have the answer. But what I can tell you is that by committee, I think that the Fighting Irish have a really good opportunity to make this game very convincing, a convincing win if they have to. I think ultimately that he's going to be a big loss. You know, you just don't replace a guy who's a 1,000-yard rusher, and it's that simple. But however, I'm pretty sure Marcus Freeman and Mike Denbrook will have all the answers once Thursday gets here. But let us take a look at the Penn State Nittany Lions and your Fighting Irish. Looking at this game in so many different ways, I believe this game is ultimately going to be won with Penn State's offense facing off against the Notre Dame defense. Now, for what it's worth, we have to go and we have to really, really stare at what Penn State does. You know, watching that SMU game and watching the game against Boise State and seeing the different... Let's keep in mind that I get it. I totally understand that Ashton Jeanty is a totally different animal. But this Notre Dame running game is a different monster too. I believe the Irish are going to be able to find some success with this running game because Boise's offensive line is not nearly as imposing as Notre Dame's. Now, there are a lot of numbers that will throw you off. They're top 10 in yards per rush. They're top 10 in yards in certain areas. But now I know we're talking about the Notre Dame defense against the Penn State offense. But I just had to throw those nuggets in there. I'm sorry I got off pace. But realistically, looking at this game and really starting to break it down, there was really nothing that Penn State's defense really did to stop Boise State and their offense. They stuck 7 and 8 guys in the box and dared Boise State to beat them that way. But I really like what I saw out of Denbrook, especially when I saw Georgia really coming up strong, and they did. Ultimately, Notre Dame played the patience game, and they were able to do some things. But looking at what Notre Dame's defense against Penn State's offense is really one of those where we saw a lot of aggression on that side of the ball. To me, Drew Aller's overrated. I've heard guys say, oh, he's got an NFL grade. Will Levis had an NFL grade too. So, me personally, I'm not. He could come out there and both throw flames. So, I don't want to say that this is a guy that's going to really do his thing. But then again, I'm not going to throw away the idea that he couldn't come out here and really hurt us. But then again, they've got two really good running backs. So Penn State's going to try to run the ball. I don't think the same amount of confidence in Aller's going to be put out there with this secondary. I truly believe that Franklin's not going to want to lose this game on the shoulder of Drew Aller. I really believe that. I think ultimately he's going to want to be patient. He's not going to take too many risks. If they get in trouble and they have to take a shot, then maybe. But for the most part, I don't see this as being a team that's going to go out there and they're going to really go out there and try to do too much. I think this is going to be one of those games where possibly the first turnover is what's going to be the difference in the game, because I don't see... now, Tyler Warren's a beast. He's best tight end in the country. Statistically, I still think we got the two best tight ends in the country, and Raritan and Mitchell Evans. A lot of people are going to say it's this, that, and that. Look, I'm going to tell you, Riley Leonard's a lot of the reason why our receivers and tight ends aren't getting it done. He's a blessing, but then he's a curse at the same time. I don't care what anybody has to say. He's a blessing and he's a curse. People need to, really get a sense of what we have. There's nothing wrong with what Riley Leonard brings to the party, but the reality of it is he's a stigma to a lot of our passing game. He's not been efficient. He's been efficient, but he hasn't been downfield efficient. He doesn't really scare you down the field. Now, he scares you inside the red zone. I mean, you'd be a fool not to be terrified of this guy in the red zone, because he really brings it in the red zone. He's really that dude there. But however, going back to what Penn State has on that offensive side of the ball, they've got two of probably the most dynamic, not dynamic, but they're, you've got Katron Allen, who's got over 1,000, and then you got Singleton, who has got over 1,000 himself. So you got two backs, two really big backs. This is something they did not face with Georgia. Traditionally, Georgia has two backs that are right at 230. And I'm not going to say that Notre Dame's going to have more success than, per se, Boise or SMU. But I think ultimately our guys are big enough and more physical to wear these guys down. I think this will be a game where this will remind you a lot of Ohio State. The only difference is I think we're faster than Ohio State on defense. But this is going to be a game where Penn State better get their line better be able to get off of our guys and get to the second level, or this is going to be a long day like it was with Georgia. And ultimately, I don't think, Irish Nation, we can take this game lightly as it looks, because I think Penn State's offensive line is slightly better running the football. Could be wrong. Now, if we get the results we get against Georgia and it's Drew Aller versus our guys, I think Gunnar Stockton's better than Drew Aller. I don't care what anybody has to say, because the reality of it is, when you look down this receiving core, there's really not a lot of guys that jump out at you. It's just Tyler Warren, 98 grabs, 111.58. That's unheard of for a tight end. And he's Mr. Everything for them. They've even lined him up in short yardage situations on third downs, and they've gone with him, taking direct snaps. I would exercise caution if I'm Penn State. Use him sparingly in that, because you lose him, there's no way they win this game. They lose Tyler Warren, they're done. You can mark that down. They lose Tyler Warren in this game, they're done. And the real question mark is going to be, and I believe Tyler Wojak of Lockdown Irish brought it up. He said he thinks special teams could be huge. Now, both of these teams have had question marks in the kicking game. Whereas you look at Penn State kicker Ryan Barker, who's 45 or 46 on field goals, and he's 14 out of 17 on field goals, but he's 6 out of 8 on 40 and 49. That's going to be a huge difference when you go into this game, because you very well are gonna you may have to kick a long field goal, and he's only kicked one from 50, and he's 0 for 1. This could be a situation where Penn State needs one of those 50-yard field goals, and the question is he going to be good for it? But needless to say, biggest thing you may have to deal with in Miami is going to be possibly the wind. But as I said, you've got a lot of really good athletes on this Penn State defense, including Abdul Carter, who is banged up, but he says he's going to be good to go in this game. So that's decent news for them right now. That the question is, how close to 100% is he going to be before the game? He has 11 sacks, 63 total tackles on the year, and as many of you know, I am a Carolina Panther fan. They're saying that this is who we're going to draft. Not necessarily sure I want this guy. I don't like his size, which I think is going to be an issue in this game. His speed, he's going to have to show me he can get around the corner in this game. But the issue with that is going to be Riley Leonard is not your traditional quarterback. He's going to be one of those guys, I think he's just going to step back, see what Penn State's defense is going to give him, and then just take off running, which is, I don't have a problem with that now. This is pretty much what the identity of our offense has been. And if he does throw it, it's going to be fast, usually quick, short throws, not really a whole lot of down the field, which I really would like to see. But as I said in the last show, I just hope he doesn't throw it away. He doesn't throw any interceptions. That's what I'm hoping for. Because really the only way Notre Dame is going to lose any game putridly is going to be because they get turnover, or they turn the ball over, as we saw with Georgia. And we're going to have to create turnovers with Penn State. And Drew Allar has shown he will turn it over. It's just a matter of when. And it would be nice if we could mix up coverages on this Penn State defense and get some easy interceptions. I know what people will say, well, there's no such thing as easy ones. Oh, there are. If you get the right coverage called and you can get him in a situation where he's wondering what he's doing, absolutely. And with the guys we have, even with Xavier Watts being banged up, it could be a situation where we could go out and really test the waters as far as getting him to make some decisions that he does not necessarily want to, presumably make. But really looking at this team, and you see guys like Tuihalamaka, who had a huge game last week, and RJ Oben, a transfer who just had that monster play. I sit and I watch this game and against Georgia, and I say to myself, how amazing would it be if you had Boubacar Traore, or you had Jordan Patella in the game. This would be insane. This would be absolutely insane if we had these guys. But that's just one of those with that next man up mentality just coming to fruition, and seeing what this team has to offer and what they're going to be capable of. And even though Bryce Young got away with 2 last week, it's going to be paramount that he doesn't make that mistake this week. It was huge. It was almost a huge mistake. But as I said, RJ Oben along with Bryce Young had a big game, and you can't say enough about RJ He was absolutely massive in that game. Leonard Moore and Drake Bowen had great games, and watching Joshua Burnham come into the game and actually play some major minutes last week, and Donovan Heinisch had some great plays last week. And Don Shula, you can't say anything more about the way this guy's played. And, of course, the ageless wonder, Jack Kaiser. Gabriel Rubio was massive in this game. You know, my whole question was, who was going to step up and take Riley Mills' spot? And then you see Gabriel Rubio just... This is why I'm not afraid against Penn State, because the way Rubio played. And the question I have is, where the heck has he been all year? I'm like, look, Rubio is the perfect example of we can rotate guys in and out. This was a guy that's been sitting over there on the bench, 6'5", 316, and here he comes on probably one of the biggest nights of his life, knowing that our best interior guy, and he picks up 4 tackles in this game and stymied that Georgia running game, which, in my opinion, is not going to be nearly as, I guess you could say, I don't want to say potent, but, you know, it's not nearly as dependent as this Penn State offense is. This Penn State offense is heavy run. They don't depend on Aller. If Aller gives them something, it's a bonus. Franklin wants to run the football with his 220-pound backs, and that's where they want to live. They don't want to have to put the ball in harm's way. And honestly, they're going to have to make some serious holes in this Notre Dame defense. And I haven't seen them be able to do it against really top-notch opponents. That is where I struggle to see Penn State being able to do anything. But here's the thing. The power rankings have us ranked to win this game just as they did against Georgia. Most folks didn't know that. The power index has us to win this game. However, do I think Notre Dame is just going to cakewalk this game? I think ultimately what happens is Penn State gets worn down, because I watch a lot of what I saw in that Ohio State game. Ohio State's not nearly as big and imposing on the offensive line as Notre Dame is, but they stretch you out immensely. Then you have the fact that Ohio State's secondary is just like ours. They play a lot of physical ball, and they do procure a lot of penalties. Then we have to look at the fact that Aller has his moments where he actually puts his thing down, and he actually makes some serious noise in the passing game. And if that happens, this could be a long game for the Irish. I mean, I think Christian Gray is going to get picked on. I think ultimately he's going to have to play huge. His ability to cover and his ability to do the things that Marcus Freeman is asking of him. He and Leonard Moore. Leonard Moore had just an absolute clinic out there last week against the Bulldogs, and I don't believe that the Georgia Bulldogs believe that the Irish were going to be able to cover the way they did. I think ultimately that they didn't realize what they were up against. I don't think they realized the type of speed they were up against, and ultimately it ended up costing them. Let's go to the opposite side of this thing. What happens when the Irish are on offense? What happens when the Notre Dame Fighting Irish are on offense? Of course, like we said, we got to look out for Abdul Carter, but I think the best way you neutralize him, and this is going to be something Denbroke's got to think about, let's keep our running back in the backfield and let's run draws. Get out there, and as soon as we get Carter up the field, run at his side. Boom. Make him play discipline. The best way you neutralize a great pass rusher, you make him play discipline. And I think the reality of it is that Penn State is going to rely so heavily on its defense. And I know what people are going to say, well, Notre Dame relies so heavily on its defense. What are you talking about? Yes, Notre Dame does rely heavily on its running game. But however, when you look back at this team and you think, Riley Leonard did not need the defense to get the ball back for him. Leonard did a great job. He and the Irish offense last week of when the game was over, they ran it out. That's all there is to it. They ran it out. And the reality of it is when you start watching a team that can finish drives and finish games with a Jadarian Price, runs from Jadarian Price, as well as Riley Leonard and even Jaden Thomas. When you can get those things going on, it's going to be tough. And honestly, I think Georgia's defense is much more potent than one Penn State. And I honestly think these linemen are just absolutely teeing off right now. And there's a possibility Charles Jagusah could see some action. And that would be just absolutely massive for Notre Dame if this guy was able to play. I mean, this would be just monstrous if this guy was able to step in and he was able to play and they were able to get something out of Charles Jagusah after, because this guy's mammoth. It would be absolutely amazing if this guy ended up on the football field Thursday night. And, you know, I just cringe at the thought of this guy being able to get out there and start pushing around some of those Nittany Lions. Now, don't get me wrong, the Nittany Lions are not light, but they're not very heavy up front. When you go across the board and you look at the way the Penn State Nittany Lions look, it's not necessarily a overwhelming size advantage when you look at the defense. I mean, as I said before, you look at, they've got a big offensive line, no doubt. Their offensive line is big, but then when you look up front, you've got Abdul Carter, who's 6'3", 259, but his quickness is just absolutely bona fide. But outside, all of their edge rushers are relatively small, and even their defensive tackles, they're quick, but you don't have a whole bunch of size up front that really scares you. Now you got Devon, Jay Thomas that's up there. He's over 300 pounds. And as well as Alonzo Ford and Xavier Gilliam. But the reality of it is, when you start looking at this team across the board, can Notre Dame move them? This line is not nearly as big as Georgia's was, and it's not nearly as athletic. Outside of Carter, that's really all you have. The linebackers, just your garden variety Micah Parson type guys. I know what people are going to say. Oh, that's really refreshing. But Notre Dame's handled these kind of guys, is what I'm telling you. And I think all Denbrook's really got to do. Now, one thing I will say, they're a lot more disciplined than Georgia was. I think Georgia was a lot more disciplined in this game because there were times they were able to get away. But I think ultimately Georgia's defense ran out of gas, it seemed like to me. Because you knew Riley Leonard was coming at some point. And unfortunately, you stopped him a handful of times. But then the times you really needed to stop, you didn't get one. I think this is going to be a game where these defensive backs for Penn State are really going to get tested. I think this is going to be one of those opportunities where guys like Jaden Grayhouse are going to get their opportunities. And my biggest complaint here is, like I said, I think ultimately what Notre Dame really needs to do is focus on the running game and stick with what I like to call that 12 and 13 man personnel, which is 2 tight ends and 3 tight ends, and possibly go to, if Jeremiah Love is healthy, we're hearing he may not. He's tried to practice with a knee brace. That hasn't worked out well. But hey, I say we use him sparingly. Put him out there if he can just move a little bit. At least give them something to look at, because I don't care what anybody said. This is not something you want to leave without. Love only had 1 carry for 2 yards in this game. If you look at it, Notre Dame as a team, he had 1 catch, He had 6 carries for 19 yards. I think ultimately you have to look at this as being Riley Leonard's football game too, until we're able to break a few. I think ultimately we need to go with Jadarian Price. We need to go with Aeneas Williams as well. Jordan Faison and Jaden Thomas were great on those speed sweeps. I think you do that and you keep Penn State even. I think if we can keep them even kill, we can eventually break one to the outside. I saw it with Georgia. We were able to get outside with Price. Price got good speed, but he ain't got Jeremiah Love speed. When they saw Jeremiah Love, look, Denbrook and Marcus Freeman done a great job saying this is Jeremiah Love's team. So when Jadarian Price comes in there, it's like, whatever. That's what the other teams are saying, you guys. They're looking at Jadarian Price like he's chopped liver. And here he comes doing what he did. I mean, he only had 37 yards on the ground, but he had important yards then. And I don't want to see, I know it was 15 to 24, but you look at we ran the ball 37 times. I think we got to be very, very, very creative with how we run the football against Penn State. Get them off their rockers early. Tyler Wojak of Locked On Irish seems to think this game's going to come down to a special teams play. I think ultimately we don't need to set up any returns because James Franklin's going to be trying that, especially if Tyler Warren is out there playing special teams. This is a guy that is Mr. Everything. He's going to be the key to this game. And I think ultimately Riley Leonard's going to be the ultimate key for Notre Dame. If he doesn't play well, he definitely doesn't need to walk into this game with a turnover. I think R.J. Oben's got to play, but he's got to ball out. I think ultimately, as I said, Xavier Watts had 7 total tackles and a tackle for a loss, but he also got banged up in that game. Adon Schuler can't put a price on how well he played. Kaiser had a sack in the last game. Tui Alamaka had one. Hennish had a sack. And R.J. Oben also had one. They had 4 sacks of Georgia quarterback Gunnar Stockton. So we're going to need that with Aller because ultimately Penn State's going to try to throw the football. And hopefully Al Golden's got a nice blitz package waiting on him, which will allow the Notre Dame defense to feast a little bit. Guys like Xavier Watts and Jaden Harrison, as well as Adon Schuler and possibly Christian Gray and Leonard Moore. So, who had 2 pass breakups in that Georgia game. Sorry, guys, I didn't do a review of the game for this channel, but I'll make sure I keep up with it. But, guys, that's my stake on Notre Dame versus Penn State. Oh, I forgot. Irish by 10. Yeah, Irish by 10. I got the Irish winning this game by 10 points. I think we get to be too much. A lot of people are going to say, oh, that's a little bit much. It has nothing to do with James Franklin winning the big game. It's just the fact that there are things that Notre Dame is doing better, player personnel-wise, that Penn State is. I see Penn State and I see the same Notre Dame team I saw against Ohio State. That's what I saw. And Penn State's going to have to take that last step. That's what I'm seeing. Maybe Drew Aller's it. Maybe they need to get another wide receiver, a group of wide receivers. As I said, I'm not sold on Drew Aller. Still don't think he's that guy. But let me know what you guys think down in the comments. Do you think Drew Aller is the guy? Do you think Notre Dame should really, really be shaking in their boots for this game? Do you think they're going to win? Do you think it's going to be a Penn State upset? Do you think Riley Leonard is going to be the catalyst, or is someone else going to be the catalyst? Also, go to my Facebook page at Talk Like a Champion. Find out what other things we got going on. Also, look me up on Instagram so you can find out what other shenanigans I am caught up in during, before, and after the season. But until we meet again,
may the road rise up to meet you. May the wind be always at your back. May the sun rise warm upon your face. May the rains fall soft upon your fields. And until we meet again, may God hold you in the palm of his hand.